Hi, I'm Ellen Dickson, Mayor of Summit, and this is the Summit Mayor's Show. With me today are three members of our Housing Authority community. To my right is Lou Riccio. He's the Executive Director of the Summit Housing Authority, and we share him with Madison as a shared agreement. Melissa Kuzma is right next to him. She's the Deputy Director. And Richard Poole, to my left, is Chairman of the Summit Affordable Housing Committee. Melissa, let's start with you. What would you say is our need for affordable housing in Summit? And it's a two-part question, as I mentioned. It's moral and it's legal. So.
Okay. Well, I'll reference the Housing Authority's waiting list just to give you an idea. There are 311 people on our waiting list. The average wait time for the senior building is approximately 2 years, and for the family housing can be 7 to 10 years. We recently also held a lottery for 9 affordable housing units that are being built, and for those 9 units we got over 300 applications.
Wow. So those 9 units you're talking about are as a result of the COA fair share or growth share rules that we live under, is that correct? Yes, okay, so that's a very long list.
What's interesting about these latest 9 units is that they're being built by a private developer who's required to provide affordable housing as part of his obligation for building some market rate housing. And it's one of the few ways that someone has been able to get additional affordable housing built in the city.
And we did talk about possibly putting pictures of the actual affordable housing on screen, but we decided that the people who live there don't want to be singled out. So it does blend in with the community. It absolutely blends in. Some of it's brand new construction, beautiful homes. So it's just become part of the fabric of our community at this point. Yeah,
yes, it has. That's one of the missions that the Housing Authority has had, and the nonprofit, is to make sure that any affordable housing that is developed does blend into the fabric of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Now, Richard, let's start at the beginning. What is the history of development of affordable housing in Summit? It goes back many, many years, and it was well before it was a legal obligation.
That's correct. The Summit Civic Foundation developed 28 units on Dennis Place in the 1950s. The Summit Housing Authority, using HUD funding, Housing and Urban Development federal funding, developed the Glenwood project in the late 1960s.
And that's the one that's right in downtown,
correct,
sort of between
kind of
Harquail
and the new bicycle shop, and
yes, exactly.
And goes behind the Chase Bank. That was developed with both private fundraising and federal HUD funds. We then did, in the 1970s, the Weaver Street project, which is the corner of Weaver and Morris by Douglas Motors, and that was also, there was fundraising involved in that too, so that was a joint federal money and private fundraising. And then, of course, we did the senior building, 125 units, right by City Hall. That's now called the Vito Gallo building. It's 125 units of senior housing. In addition to the housing that's been built with the federal money, we've also built the Habitat build. It was a 6-plex. There was the town out of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is not taxpayer money, but is trust fund money raised via fees on building. That was used to purchase land. That was a 6-plex was built. There was about a $700,000 fundraising effort that went along with the town's money. In addition, we have 14 units of our house housing in Summit, which is affordable housing, although it doesn't count under COA regulations. The ARC housing at the corner of Morris and Edgar Street.
Edgar Street,
right, is also affordable housing, and we're now having something new from Home First at the Tiger Barron property down there by the Oaks Memorial Church. So
right,
there's a number of projects, some of which count under COA, some of which don't, some of which predates. So there's kind of a math puzzle to be done every time one discusses what's affordable housing in the community and what in terms of what we've gotten done.
Now the Tiger Barron project is actually the parsonage, which used to go with Oaks Memorial Church.
That's right.
It's, okay. Melissa, we didn't really go over eligibility for the senior housing, and I want to have people understand the criteria, because I have had people say to me, oh, my mother's turning 85 and her health is failing. I'm really interested in getting her into the senior housing. And that's not probably the best age to start thinking about it. You really need to plan further ahead. And what are the income criteria and what age do you need to be?
Okay, to be eligible for the senior building, you have to be 62, and you cannot apply until you are 62. The income limits for one person are $45,500 a year, and for two people it would be $52,000 a year. So we also have a preference for Summit residents or the parents of Summit residents. So the waiting list numbers that I mentioned earlier do include some Summit residents as well as out-of-town applicants, and because the waiting list is so long and we always have many Summit residents applying, we really never get to the point where we're accepting tenants from outside of Summit. So I would say if you're around that age, you're hitting the eligibility age, you might want to look at what your finances are going to be, what your current housing needs are, maybe if you have a house to sell or you're living in an apartment, and get on that waiting list because it is a 2-year wait.
Are you allowed to have assets? What if you sold your house for $800,000?
Yeah, we would count that as part of your income. 2% of assets would count towards annual income.
Oh, I see. So you can actually have some assets.
Yes.
And still be eligible to live there. And boy,
and sorry.
No, I'm just saying what a great location and a great building.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. It's right downtown. It's a great community and a really wonderful place for people to live.
And we like seniors who do have some income, because every one of the residents pays 30% of their adjusted gross income toward the rent. So as their income increases, the rent increases, and as their income decreases, the rent decreases. With the turn in the economy recently, a lot of our residents have had to use substantial amounts of their assets, their stocks and bonds that they have in their savings accounts, so that their income has gone down substantially, and so have the rents. So when we look at these income limits, we usually don't keep people at the top of the income limits. They're usually in that $16,000 to $18,000 a year range.
And I was noticing, looking at your budget, you really have not been getting much help from the federal government.
Since 1980, our budgets have been reduced by over 30%. Just recently, there was a move by the federal government to reduce them even further, and that's currently being litigated in Washington. But we have had to work primarily with the rents that we collect and a very minor operating subsidy.
But I noticed you have put in new kitchens, new air conditioning, new roof, so you've been able to do a lot with a little.
For years, the Summit Housing Authority has been very frugal, and they saved a lot of money in their reserves. Recently, because of the change in Washington, there was a move to capture those reserves by the federal government and use them for other purposes in other housing authorities. And the Board of Commissioners of the Housing Authority in Summit decided it was best to use them at home. And we spent a lot of our reserves, almost 50%, on the new roofs, the new HVAC systems, windows, ranges, refrigerators.
Which was all due because it was built in '86, I
Correct,
believe?
it was occupied in '86.
So, yeah, they're coming to the end of the useful life.
The Housing Authority actually is learning to be entrepreneurial. For example, there are cell towers on the roof, things like that,
Yes.
which generate revenue, which allows the mission to be supported while not requiring federal money.
Isn't there a little restaurant in the lobby too?
Yes.
Yes, there is a coffee shop.
Yeah.
And anybody's welcome to come in and have coffee and
Absolutely.
breakfast. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of the workers, when we were doing the work on the windows and the roof, a lot of the workers would have breakfast and lunch there.
Oh, that's nice.
But it is open to the public, so.
That's nice. Okay.
Come on down.
Now, what is our obligation? And can explain what I mean by obligation, because here we're getting into some heavily technical jargon that maybe only you can explain.
Yeah, it's a very confusing and almost a moving target. Because the Council on Affordable Housing over the years has gone through many changes, and their last set of rules, which they call the third round rules, were actually, part of them were struck down by the Supreme Court as being unconstitutional. However, having said that, we in Summit have an obligation of approximately 240 units. That was our original obligation. That obligation has been reduced significantly by land adjustments when The state said we needed 240 units. They said Summit had all of this vacant land. It did not have the vacant land. For instance, they used the Board of Education high school fields as part of the vacant land. Yeah. We argued that point and were successful in getting them to agree that our obligation was reduced down to 40 units. And we are going to meet that obligation through several avenues. One was the Habitat Build on Morris Avenue. Another is a rehabilitation program. The units at the Parsonage House is part of that obligation, as well as some of the obligation from the Summit Medical Group building. That will be part of the numbers to meet that obligation. And we're planning on doing some other things in the future with what they call affordability assistance. We'll try to help people in apartments or in their homes maintain their homes.
That's a good program. There is money for people who income qualify to apply to get a new roof, a new boiler,
yes.
That type of new windows. And how do they apply for that?
They contact the Housing Authority. We will send them an application. They will complete the application. We will deem them to be either income eligible or not. If they are income eligible, we will then turn it over to the consultants who will send a contractor out to the site to evaluate what they need to be done. They will do this in consultation with the homeowner. Then the consultant will get bids on how much it will cost to do the repairs. Repairs will be done, and the city, through its Affordable Housing Trust Fund, will actually pay for those repairs.
It's a great way to preserve an aging housing stock.
Fantastic way. We have spent, in some cases, in excess of $60,000 on a home, putting in new windows and a new roof, and it's a very worthwhile program.
Melissa, we have a number of different organizations in town, and they all revolve around public housing. What is the Summit Housing Authority versus, Richard, maybe you can answer, what's the SAHC and any other organization I'm missing?
Okay. The Housing Authority provides conventional low-income public housing for families, seniors, and the disabled. So we have 195 public housing units. The senior building, which we've talked about, Glenwood Place and Weaver Street. We're an independent authority. We're not part of the city. We're not part of the state. Most of our income does come from our rents, and we receive a small subsidy from the federal government, as Lou mentioned earlier.
Would you say you're a federal employee, or?
No.
No,
want to explain that?
We're a quasi-public corporation, so in reality, employees of the Housing Authority are just that. They're employees of the Housing Authority. They're neither state, city, or federal employees.
Mm-hmm. And one thing we didn't really cover is the list for public housing. What is the non-senior? What is the income level, and what are...
It would be the same. It depends on the family size.
Mm-hmm.
So again, for one person, it's $45,500. For two, it's $52,000 per year. 3 people would be $58,500, and so on, going up incrementally.
But is it a flat rate? What if your income rises while you're living
Okay. These are the maximum incomes that you could have to be eligible for public housing. Your rent is based on 30% of whatever that income is. So as a resident's income increases, they would come in and we would redo their rent calculation, and the rent would go up or down depending on what their income is.
Okay. Okay. And there's no caps on it, or?
Well, they're unfortunately...
Is that a tricky question?
It's not a tricky question. It's one that I've always had a problem, not with the question, but with the way Congress handled this. Prior to 1998, there was no cap. So the incentive for someone to move out of public housing was as your income rose, your rent rose to the point where it became the same as the market, and you would move into the private market. In 1998, Congress passed a bill that said we're going to create flat rents. So we are not going to penalize residents as their income goes up. Once it gets to a certain point, they'll pay the flat rent, and if their income goes to $100,000 a year, they can still stay, but they'll only pay the flat rent. The problem with that is there's no incentive for them to move. I mean, someone could be living in public housing with an income of $100,000 a year and pay a flat rent of $1,400 or $1,500 a month. When they're really using that resource, that public housing unit, that could be better used by someone who is of a lower income.
If you're just joining us, we're here with Lou Riccio. He's Director of the Summit Housing Authority, Melissa Kuzman, Deputy Director, and Richard Poole with the Summit Affordable Housing Committee. Now on that point, that's an interesting point, because it wouldn't matter if we didn't have lots of families that are interested in being in the public housing, but as you said, didn't you say you have a 7 to 10 year waiting list? And as mayor, one of the harder things, and I've only gotten one call like this from a mother with a child that was being evicted, and you realize there's not much a city can do at that point. We don't have a cash account of money we can help pay the rent. And with a waiting list of 7 years, all I could really do was refer her to a homeless shelter, and she was not interested in that. And we do have for another program, we'll talk to Family Promise and some of the other resources. But there is a crying need, and it's a shame that if someone is really on their feet, they need to move out.
I think the city sees that need, and through this new program which the city is contemplating implementing, the Affordability Assistance Plan, the Affordability Assistance Program, that family might be able to be assisted in a private apartment. Right. Because the Affordability Assistance Plan will work like a housing choice voucher, where the individual family will pay 30% of their income, and the city will pay the difference to whatever the rent is. And this way, it might help a family who's being evicted find someplace in the private sector.
We also have raised Lou mentioned the flat rents. The flat rents have been actually raised twice since I was on the Housing Authority. Initially, we went to what are the Section 8 regional rents, and now we've more recently gone to a survey of the Summit rents to try and bring ourselves more in line with what the market rents are, to encourage people to move.
Well, rents, from watching friends of mine trying to rents are through the roof in this town. $3,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment, and it's very difficult to afford Summit at this point. You were going to talk about the SAHC.
Yeah, the SAHC, when the legislation was created in New Jersey under the defined COA and things like that, there was a provision for nonprofits to be created within a community to be tasked with the role of creating the affordable housing. As part of that role, we created the Summit Affordable Housing Corporation, of which I'm chairman, and we have our initial project was the Habitat build. We got that off the ground and the 6 units there, and now we're working with the staff at City Hall and the Common Council to pass this affordability assistance program that Lou talked about. So that would kind of be our next major step.
We have looked at a number of properties that trying to get some affordable housing, and the market moves too fast or the risk level's too high. I know some of the buildings you look at and think, well, okay, we could buy it for $500,000, but what if it needs $200,000 or $300,000 worth of renovation, or it ends up being a tear down, which can happen. So there's a risk level that you don't have the bank account to really handle. So that makes it difficult to sometimes buy existing properties.
We are very much unlike a private developer. For example, if there is a potential of an oil tank or something like that, we need the oil tank to be removed and what's called a NOFA, no further action, statement from the seller, so that we don't have don't take in any liability. If there's an asbestos cleanup, again, we don't have deep pockets to pay for any kind of a cleanup. So when we look at a building, we have to be able to deal with all of those kinds of things. And then in addition, because of the length of time involved with the Common Council, and sometimes if there's a zoning case or things like that, we're only able to make a purchase in event of a seller who is willing to live with a very long close time. So in other words, if you were selling your house and you're moving to California, something like that, and you want to close in 60 or 90 days, that's just not a situation that we can handle. We were very lucky, for example, with the Habitat build, that the seller was very motivated to sell to Habitat, and that as a result, he was willing to deal with the 6 months of zoning board hearings and the appeal period and all of those kinds of things, in addition to all of the decisions that had to go in first. So he sat for quite a long time before he actually got paid.
I think one of the flaws of the COA program is it's so individualized. Each town has to have a plan and a round and a grand master. And what if it was on the border of Springfield or New Providence, the perfect property? We can't use it for Summit, and it just seems so localized that...
Once again, it's government.
Yes.
And it's one size fits all. Right. And you can't create programs at the federal level or at the state level where you think one size is going to fit all, because it can't. Every municipality is different. Every state is different. And in New Jersey, every county is substantially different.
Right.
And when they lump Union County, which Summit is in, with Morris County, and with Warren County and Essex County, there's such differences amongst those 4 counties that it becomes ridiculous trying to meet all of those needs. Essex County has a greater need, maybe, than Morris County has. Union County may have a much greater need than Warren County has, but the state never took that into consideration. In addition, to mandate that every municipality have affordable housing is not a bad thing, but then to tie the municipality's hands on how you can develop that housing is. The regional contributions agreements, which Summit took part in many years ago, as a housing advocate, I'm very much in favor of those.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I thought that made a lot of sense also.
It does. I mean, in a place like Madison, where if I had money, I could develop additional affordable housing. Well, why couldn't Summit give me the money? I would take on part of that obligation. Unfortunately, the state legislature ruled that they didn't like that idea, and is no longer an eligible manner in which to develop affordable housing.
No, I know this is a totally built-out community. I know that. Even looking for another spot to build another baseball field or even a community garden. We are going to have a community garden, it looks like, and it'll be that one little vacant lot in front of Overlook Hospital. And I'm like, I'm glad it's going to work out, but that's the only piece of green space in that whole area. So we really are built out. There's just not, and if there is an odd lot here or there, it might cost $1 million, and that's just not affordable for something along these lines.
As you said earlier, we've looked at properties that were complete teardowns, and they were $500,000, $750,000, and for a nonprofit to spend that much money for the land alone when you're building affordable housing, it just financially it can't be done. If it were for a market rate, yes, a private developer could do that because the rents they could charge would be $3,000 a month. But our average rents are in the area of $300 a month. We can't make the numbers work.
And we had to do a lot of the Habitat build was fundraising, individual churches were doing individual charity fundraising and stuff like that. Yeah. It was a slow process generating all that revenue to get that built.
Now, the Habitat project was somewhat controversial. There was a lot of support for it. Can you tell us something about the families that have moved in there? There are not a lot of children in that, as I recall.
That is correct.
A little bit about the profile. I have met some of them. One was a lovely woman who's a health inspector in another town. And,
correct. There are 3 who work in the health space in the broadest sense. One is obviously works for a Board of Health, and 2 of them, one is an LPN working in a nursing home, and one is a nurse working in a nursing home. We have one is a husband and wife. He works at a gas station. I think she works at Staples. There is a woman who runs a bookstore in Madison, I think.
Correct.
And her daughter, and she has a daughter, but the daughter is working an intern program in a hairdresser, hair salon. There are 3 aged out, in terms of the public school system, 3 children that are aged out. The one who's in that intern program, another one who's in college, and another one who's in a different kind of an intern program. And there are really only 4 kids that are in the school system, and then there's one who's younger. And there's 2 in the Jefferson, and 1 in middle, and 1 in the high school. So it's a very limited impact in terms of the public schools, and 6 families. And they all have jobs that are the kinds of things that we all need. We need people to work at gas stations and to work at Staples and to do our hair and to run bookstores and do all those kinds of things.
Thank you. We don't have too much time left. Is there something I haven't covered that any of you would like to bring up?
Only to say that between the Housing Authority, the Summit Affordable Housing Corporation, and the City of Summit, we are planning and proposing to do additional affordable housing in the city. Whether it's going to be through the purchase of existing homes or whether it's going to be through the Affordability Assistance Program, I think because the need exists, we will all continue to try to help as many people as possible with this horrible housing burden. Today's economy has made it much worse because those at the lower end of the salary range are the ones who are being laid off first, and those are the ones who need the help most.
Now, I have asked you this before, but just for our audience, you've looked at short sales and foreclosures, but those are not as easy as you would think.
No. In New Jersey, we could be notified of a short sale or foreclosure today, but it might take a year before it actually comes to pass. And one of the foreclosures we looked at, we were notified several weeks ago, was a very large home that was being foreclosed upon. It was worth $2.8 million. Not the type of facility or home that we want to purchase for affordable housing.
That's absolutely the truth, is that people think of foreclosures as being affordable housing, but the reality is the house may have been purchased at one point for $3.5 million. The person may be sitting on a mortgage of $3 million. It may be foreclosed and then resells, but it sells for $2.2 million. That's not,
Obviously,
that's not affordable at $2.2 million either. I mean, it's just
So
not.
you would encourage brokers or individual people who see maybe a 6 or 12-month horizon when they want to get out of their home, that maybe you could start the process with someone like that who's planning to move maybe into assisted living in southern New Jersey and needs a longer time frame for.
Absolutely. I would strongly encourage anyone in Summit who is thinking about selling their home in the next year to 18 months to contact the Housing Authority, contact one of us, and let's discuss how we can help each other.
Now, Melissa, how long have you been with the Housing Authority now?
About 2.5 years.
Yes, okay. And Lou, how does it work sharing your job with Madison? How many other?
Yeah, right.
Is it just the two of us?
It's just the two of us. That's it. Madison and Summit. There's an interlocal service agreement between the Madison Housing Authority and the Summit Housing Authority. The Summit Housing Authority writes a check to the Madison Housing Authority every month for my services. Melissa will become the executive director as of April 1st, 2013.
Well, congratulations.
At least that's what we're discussing with the Personnel Committee, but it looks like it's a lot.
First.
And then what I will do is I will leave as the executive director and work.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and I'll be working with the nonprofit primarily.
Oh, well, congratulations. There's a number of steps you have to go through to become.
Yes, you have to have a 4-year college degree, which Melissa has. She also has a master's degree, so that takes care of 2 of the years of experience, and then you need 3 years experience in the field, which will be complete for her as of April of next year.
Okay, and what we haven't mentioned is our own Housing Authority Board, which is chaired by Mary Zimmerman,
Yes.
and we have a number of residents on that board.
Right, they're all residents. They're a 7-member board with Mary as the chair. The other members are Jeff Haverstadt,
Oh, yes.
Richard Poole, Coulter
Pollock.
Pollock,
Stephen Spur.
Stephen Spur, thank you,
Dennis White.
Pam Kuhn.
Pam Kuhn.
Dennis White, and Pam Kuhn.
Yes.
Those are the 7 members.
And usually we have a city council member sit on the board.
Yes,
Pat Hurley
is our liaison.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
because
Right.
those are not public meetings, though, are they?
Yes, they are. They're
So
public meetings.
Okay, if people are interested, check on, you go up to the second floor of City Hall, there's a schedule of what meetings
Correct.
are going on.
We also have a website which lists our meeting dates, has minutes of our meetings and our schedule and our agendas.
Now, what's the website?
www.summitnjha.org.
That's why I couldn't find it. I didn't know all of those. Okay, so it's.
I think if you search for Summit Housing Authority,
Okay,
on
well.
Google, it comes up. And you can also reach us through the city's website. There's a link to our website from there.
Well, thank you all very much, and thanks
Thank
for the
you.
work you do for
You're
Summit.
quite welcome.
And I think we're just about out of time. But again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come to
And
talk to us
thank you
about
as the
Thank
mayor,
you
and I
for
thank the
having
Common
us.
Council for all of your help over the last 3 years.
We try.